Hi, this is T with TeaQuilts, and we are starting our broadcast for tonight. It is of pricing quilts for customers or in specific for people that ask you to make a quilt for them. You may not be in the business of doing customer quilts, but because somebody knows that you are a quilter, they may want you to do a quilt for them. So I am going to wait a few minutes to get some of the viewers into the room since I just opened up the chat, and we'll get started shortly. You can go ahead and do your viewer shout outs in the chat box if you like. I can do some of those while we wait. When we have about 25 viewers, I think we're around 15 right now. Welcome, everybody. So we're just waiting for a few more to come into the chat room, and then we'll get started on our topic. I'll do a few shout outs. So if you want to be shouted out or want me to know you're in the chat room, please put it into the chat box, put your name and where you're from. We got Lisa Capon Quilts. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for watching today. Darlene Farmer. She's from Northern Virginia. Got Ann S. from Kansas City, Missouri. How, Ann? We're going to be in your neck of the woods pretty soon. And I'm always on delayed status for some reason when I'm doing these recordings, so I get things a lot later. And Lisa is coming back with she's in Hampton, Virginia. And we got Tracy from Western PA. And Teajuana, she's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Bonita, hi Bonita. Welcome again. Appreciate you coming. Got Joan from Nashville. Hi Joanne, she's from Virginia Beach. And got Jackie from Ontario. Hi Jackie, thank you for watching from Canada. Hi Kathy from Ontario as well. Sue Gregory from the UK. Welcome, Sue. I think it's the middle of the night for you, correct? Got Joyce from Yamaka, Washington. And Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. I'll see you in September as well. She is from Sheffield, Alabama. Cindy is from Kentucky. And we got Linda from California. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the topic. And this is a very hard topic to talk about because people that are non-crafters do not understand how much time we put into making quilts, nor do they understand how much product costs for making quilts. So it just looked like we got a couple more shout outs. I'm going to go ahead and do those real quick. Got Linda Griffin from California, Linda Bowman from Louisiana, Lauren King from Dallas, Texas, Susie from KCMO, that's Missouri, Sarah from Sarah Florence, Alabama, I'm guessing. And Diane, hi Diane, I know where you're from. Alaquina, she's from the Bahamas. Yes, so talking about quilts and how to price them, most of the people that ask us for quilts, most of them we kind of know some kind of a way. We may not know them as a true friend, but they may be more of an acquaintance or you know them through someone. Most of my quilts that I have made in the past, I have made quilts for everyone in my family, and I have made quilts for some of my friends, and I actually make those quilts for free. And my family is pretty large. I started with my grandmother who had 12 children, so I have done quilts for almost everybody in my family tree. So I have done, I just guess, over 200 quilts for family and friends. And some of them probably have 2 or 3 quilts. and it's hot in here. Let me, I don't know if I want to cut the fan on or not. Let me just fan first. So pardon me doing this part. But so it's when one of those people then want a second quilt and they're not on your agenda currently, and then they go, well, how much will it cost for you to make me one? They have absolutely no idea what you have previously gifted to them. And so it becomes a little controversial, and you start getting little weird comments about, well, I can go buy one cheaper from Walmart, of course. And, it's kind of insulting in a way when people just don't understand how much time and effort we actually put into a quilt, let alone the finances that come with that. So I have just a few notes because I want to make sure that I don't forget anything. Okay, the first thing, when you're charging someone for a quilt, most likely you are not going to make the true value of that quilt. So if you're spending, say, 40 hours a week and you work on this quilt for a month, so that's 4 weeks of work, and you have somebody that don't even want to pay you $400 for a quilt, that's a problem because they don't see it as a job. They don't see it as a skilled talent that you have. They just think it's a group of quote unquote little old ladies sitting around quilting, and we're using fabric that's left over from clothing, or they don't understand how much fabric even costs per yard. So it's very difficult, and people get a little testy, or I feel like sometimes I'm just kind of ignored when I throw out this ballpark figure of how much would it cost for me to make a quilt. And in all honesty, it depends on who's asking me as to whether or not I would even give a serious answer, because I already know certain parts of the population are not going to want to give you 4 and 5 or whatever $100 to make a quilt. So I don't even be bothered with those people. I just kind of say that I don't sell quilts. I just say something very generic like that. So I'll be honest with that. When it's somebody that wants to have a memory quilt, something has happened in their life. If it's somebody that I'm very close to, I will offer to do that for them for free. If it's somebody I don't know and I know that they have a serious interest, like the 5 memory quilts that I just did, then I seriously sit down with them and start discussing costs. And I'll talk about some of the things that I personally do, but I'm just going to go over some generic costs at this point just to get us started on the topic. Of course, I want everyone else to also chime in if you've ever done a quilt for hire, because I am not an expert at this. I probably have only done, in my time of quilting, maybe 10 quilts that I've been paid for. And I have done some long arm machine quilting, and we'll talk about that as one of the final costs when we get there. So the first thing when you're costing out a quilt to someone is the actual cost of the supplies. Now, I bought a lot of my stash when I was working, and I tend to hit the clearance areas. So I try not to ever pay full price for fabric unless I need it for a current project. There are times that I have purchased fabric at a regular cost, or if I'm on a road trip and I just want to patronize a quilt shop, then I will buy material at regular cost. And the reason why I'm differentiating between regular cost and sales cost is because even if my fabric was purchased 6 years ago and maybe I only paid $5 or $6 off the clearance table, I'm still going to charge that customer the going price per yard on that particular quilt fabric. Anything that I'm using in that quilt top, I am going to charge you the current rate, not what I actually paid. I actually buy my batting by the yard, and if somebody wants my batting by the yard, I have to charge them what the regular yardage price is. The fact that I get a discount because I buy the whole roll, it just means that I put my money out first. So I still need to recoup my money back if I'm doing that. So always cost out your supplies. Now, what's included in your supplies? Of course, you've got your batting, and then you've also got your threads that you purchase for that, especially if you're using any kind of specialty threads. Any applique adhesive, if you're using that. The most popular things for customer quilts are the t-shirt quilts, so make sure that you're charging the at rate price for the interfacing that you're using on the back. Anything that you're using, you can even charge out for a needle, because we're supposed to charge out needles, change our needles per every quilt project. So that's something that you can add in as well. So just think about, if you're doing a quilt top, you need to know what steps are included and what it is that you're making to know what additional supplies you need to charge for. And even when I did those 5 memory quilts, I had no idea how much interfacing that I would use. And I ended up initially charging her 25 for 25 yards of interfacing. Well, she wanted fronts and backs, because she just basically wanted a clothing memory quilt, not necessarily a t-shirt like that reads what the t-shirt is type quilt. So I ended up using a lot more interfacing than I anticipated, because I didn't know how many shirts she had until they actually came. So I had to go back and redo her actual material cost with her. And you have to make sure that when you give somebody these particular prices, that you're letting them know that these are estimates, and you will get back with them if there's any additional costs. And I give them like a day or two to get back to me, because I don't want to hold up the progress of me working on the quilt. So if they want me to continue, or if they want me to stop, because that's an option as well. If they don't want me to continue, then I will give them back their items, and then I will just charge them at the hourly rate of how much time I've already worked on the project. So we got some of your costs. One of the additional things is we try to estimate how much time it's going to take, so we can charge for our labor. And labor is a very tricky thing, because they don't understand that at all, why we would charge them to make the quilt, even though we're actually doing it. They just don't get that part. And in all honesty, that's where you're never going to recoup all of your money. So even if you say that I'm going to charge, just for a round off number, $10 per hour in labor, but you spend 40 hours making something, that's $400 on that particular quilt. They don't want to pay you $400 plus approximately $200 to $250 for the supply. So we've just got those two things done. At this point, they don't even understand why it's costing them $650. So it's very difficult to price, and that's why you need to know who your target audience is. And at this point, sometimes doing the labor, I put the labor in and I just estimate something, and it's not kind of concrete. And I just want to make sure that something is down on the form. So I might do like, I might just put like 20 hours of labor just to put something on the form. And then if it's a more complex quilt, then I'll also add on other things. Like some people might want a scrappy quilt. And that's really funny, because those are the same people that think that their quilt should be cheaper because you're using the scraps, the things that you don't want. And they have no idea that because you're making a scrappy quilt, that quilt costs more money than if I made you a 2-fabric quilt, because I can just cut massive amounts of yardage. When I start working with scraps, I've got to work with all these individual pieces that I've got to pull. And especially if you don't have them into the scrap management systems that we talked about last week in the live chats. So people think because something is scrappy that's like the free quilt for them, that they shouldn't have to pay for material at all because it's left over from other products or other projects. Never mind that you pay for those fabrics in the first place. So it can get real tricky there as well. And so when you start doing these things, if you're doing, say, a 9-patch quilt, maybe you could do a 9-patch quilt in 20 hours. But if somebody is asking you to make a New York beauty quilt, well, we know that's going to be a lot of hours. And that's where I kind of don't get into making those type of quilts for people. I just won't do it. If it's not something that I'm giving as a gift, I just will not do it. If it's going to take me a massive number of hours to make the quilt, I just don't want to be involved at that particular point, because they just don't even understand the whole process of the pricing. It's very few people that are going to be willing to pay you approximately $1,500 to $2,000 to make them a quilt. Then we have the finishing. So, and this is where it gets a little tricky. If you're a person that makes quilts and you send them out to a longworm quilter to be quilted, you have now incurred additional costs in conjunction with producing this end result for your customer. So you would have to look at whatever pricing that your longworm quilter charges, and I'm just talking in generics right now, and then also whether or not you're going to purchase your own batting or you're going to buy the batting from your longworm quilter. So that's additional price. And then when you start getting into the longworm quilting, you have all the different stages of the longworm quilting. If you want a very large meander, that might be cheaper than doing a panto. And then it depends on the depth of that panto. Some pantos I can do a pass on a queen size quilt in 10 minutes. And then other ones, it takes me 40 minutes to do just one pass. It depends on the complexity of that pattern. So when I'm doing customer quilts, or if I'm doing like t-shirt style quilts, especially your more simpler ones, I pick one of those passes that I can do in 15 minutes or less, so that I'm not charging any more than the 2 cents per square inch, which is what I charge here in the Midwest to do quilting. So you have to kind of look at what the going rate is for your area and then decide how you're going to add on for finishings. Now, if somebody is asking me for semi-custom quilting or custom quilting, I start my semi-custom quilting at 3.5 cents per square inch. Custom, it can go all the way up to 7 cents per square inch. So it just depends on what someone wants. I know that when I've done my own custom quilting, I've had a quilt on my frame for a week. And if you are a longworm quilter and you're quilting and you're just starting out with that, if you have a quilt on your frame for a week, that means you're not working on anybody else's quilts. So you've got a hold up there. So you've got to really compensate yourself back for what it is that you are doing, because you can't do 2 quilts at one time per se. I'm getting a lot of comments and I'm going to get to those. And then for the final part of the finishing is the binding. Are you doing the binding? If it's a quilter or somebody that you're just doing the machine quilting for, then you may not be doing the actual binding on a quilt. And if you are doing it for a customer, are you going to charge them for the binding? Or are you going to charge them according to the rate of how the longworm quilters charge for binding? I think I can't remember if it was a quarter an inch or something like that. I have to research that. I forgot it. And then sometimes I would just add it in as my hourly rate, especially if I'm doing it on the machine, which is what I do for most of my customer quilts. I do not do sew to the front and flip to the back and hand sew the binding whenever I'm doing the customer quilt, because they don't know the difference. As long as it's finished and it looks good, that's what I'm going for at this point when we're talking about an hourly rate. So when I start sewing by hand, if I'm doing a bed size quilt and I'm sewing by hand to the back, it takes me about an hour per each side of the quilt to stitch that binding to the back. So I just tend not to do those when I'm doing customer quilts. Now, in all pricing, there is a lot of flexibility. Like when I did the 5 memory quilts for the lady, normally what I would do when I do somebody's quilt, if it's their first quilt, I would give them what the rate is, more of a flat rate of what I want, so that I'm not going through a whole lot of changes with the pricing. And then when they come back and want like a second quilt or something else made for another occasion that's coming up, I might add a 10% discount or something to the price. So it just depends on how you want to handle that. When I did the 5 memory quilts, I actually, because I knew she wanted 5, I just discounted everything right out the gate, except that I just made sure she paid for the supplies at original cost. So I'm just going to go through some of the comment sections and see what's going on here. And if you have any questions or comments or have some advice, because that's why I'm here. I am not an expert at customer quilts because I don't do it all the time. And this video actually was a customer request. So I'll go through and do some shout outs. If you've got any questions or want to share some information, please put it in the chat box. We got Wanda from Richmond, the Quilting Marines here. Hello. How are you? We got Belinda from Mississippi, Kay from Texas, Mila says hello. And the Quilting Marine is saying 200 is a lot. Wow. And I think when I mentioned the 200, it was in reference to yardage. Okay, let's just say that for your quilt top, when you got to remember, every time you cut a piece of fabric and you sew it back together, you're losing a ½ inch. So if I'm doing an intricate piecing or even just making 9 patches, because it's a lot of 9 patches that you will have to make. If you're making this for a queen or a king size bed, you're going to spend about 10 to 13 yards. You're going to need about 13 yards of fabric just to piece the quilt top. And so if you're multiplying that by the $13 that it takes for you to buy the yardage, you're getting very close to having $200 in material costs when you start adding in thread, if you're making appliques, if you're doing a memory quilt where you're adding photos and you got to buy photo transfer fabric. It's all the supplies add up. That's why it's difficult for us to make a quilt for somebody that wants to pay. They just don't get what the going rate is. They haven't been in a fabric store in years. When I first started sewing, I think I was buying fabric at Cloth World then. Sofro Fabrics is another one that I used to shop at. And fabric was less than $5 a yard back then. And Darlene saying she's glad that I'm talking about this subject. And we got Francine from Cucamonga, California. I recently had this issue, so this is very important to me. And Linda is asking about a Gail. We'll skip that. Kaylin Stitch Start Studio. Hi, Kaylin. Welcome. And any of these sites that I'm shouting out, if you check them out, be great. Lisa says, good subject. I recently saw a king size quilt at a local home goods store for $19.99. No wonder people gasped when I quote them prices. And that is exactly true. But the reason why they're asking you is because they want that old style quilting look. They want a handmade look, or they want something special in a memory quilt, but you can't get that made at Walmart. And so they can't pick their particular colors, because if you wanted those particular colors, you would have bought it at Walmart. You wouldn't even ask a quilter about this particular subject. So it's a little testy when we give back prices and they're not really happy about those. And then we have Kaylin is saying, I agree to you. It doesn't matter what you paid, it's what it's worth. And then the Quilting Marine says his wife is here agreeing with everything you say since I give them away so often. And I think that's the thing that happened for my family, is that I feel like, and I've got a couple of family members that do watch my videos, and it's kind of a little touchy subject for me because I've made them all quilts. And it's not that I don't even mind making them another one, but the first quilt I gave them, they didn't cherish, had dogs on them. The dog is chewing on it. They just didn't value it. Most of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And I would tell you that all of them wouldn't even account for the fact that the quilt that I just made them may have had a value of over $2,000, because I've had some of my quilts appraised. And because of what I do in the industry, because I've had quilts accepted into juried shows and various other reasons, I have different appraisal value for my quilts. So I would never even get the intrinsic value of what my quilts are worth. So it's just very touchy there. Um, and then the other side for me personally is that when I have a quilt show, they don't understand the aspect of it. And so a lot of them won't even buy a quilt show ticket to come even see my art being hung. And it's just something that's totally different to see your art being hung in museum style as compared to just being at home on your bed or on your wall. So it's just a little bit different. So I even have, issues with people that are very close to me that even love my quilts, but they just don't get the other part of it. Patty Spencer says, great subject. Thank you. I'm just going through trying to ignore some of the personal comments. So we've got my son Taylor. I'm hoping I said your name right. She's saying good evening. Hi to you as well. The Quilting Marine said he's so behind on quilting terms and names. I don't know which one that I threw out there, but it's a lot of them. We got Robin from RS Islands Crafts. She also has her own site from New York. She said New York beauty is paper piece, lots of thin triangles and tons of pieces. Yes, and that's why, it's just certain quilts. When people bring me photos of things that they might like, there's just certain things that I will not do because they couldn't even begin to pay that particular quilt. Michelle says so true, people have no clue on cost. And Darlene said that it's because of this particular craziness that she just opts not to sell her quilts. And that's basically where I am. I will only do them if for a memory of someone that passed, or if somebody just really, really wants a memory quilt. Otherwise, my quilts are gifts. I give to charity. And I'd say 90% of my quilts are made to rotate through my different lectures that I give. So I have themes in mind most of the time when I'm making quilts. So that's what I do with them for the most part. Every now and then I might make a challenge quilt, but I also rotate those into my lectures as well. And then Kaylin at Stitch Start Studio, she says, what about making and selling patterns? Have you done that? And is there money to be made? And the Quilting Marine, let me just sidetrack. The Quilting Marine has just Googled the New York Beauty, so he now knows what that is. So he's saying, wow, but they are beautiful quilts, but there's certain things that I'm not doing. So back to Kaylin's question about making and selling patterns. I do have a few patterns that I sell, and I don't make a whole lot of money off my patterns. I'm one of those pattern makers that I like to have color in my patterns. So I try to have color photos of the steps instead of everything being in black and white. So for that reason, I opt to print my own patterns on my own home printer. And so that costs a little bit more, but it's cheaper than me going to, say, a Kinko's to do my copy. So I opted to do that. I also opt to use a higher quality of paper than your copier paper. So I have to pay additional for that. So do I actually make money off the quilt patterns? I'd say eventually, probably after I've sold about 200 of them or so. And that takes a long time. If I'm going to a quilt guild and I've never been there before, I'd say I might sell about, on an average, I probably have about 10 to 12 patterns. I can't remember right now. So I might sell, say, 50 items or something at that particular guild. And then if I have a class, then everyone in class, so I'd say another 15 to 20 patterns. So making money in it is not very quick, especially if you're trying to do a high quality product, which is what I'm more about, what I'm putting out as to what I'm getting back in return initially. But I just don't want to go to copy places in my area. We're charging up to 80 cents. I don't even know what it is now for one-sided, or maybe it was two-sided sheet of color, and I just wasn't going to pay that and then ask somebody from 8 pages of instructions to then pay me $8 for a pattern. So I wasn't really making any money. So it was just a little bit cheaper for me to print myself. Um, the other thing with patterns is that, of course, the copyrights, they're never abided by, and I don't want to get into a huge copyright infringement thing. But once one person buy it, they buy it for 5 or 6 of their friends. So that's just what's happening, and I'm just being real with that. But I don't want to really get into copyrights. So I make some money, but I don't make a lot. Linda says that she finishes her quilts on a Sweet 16 sit down machine. It takes 12 hours to finish one. I could never recoup that cost. So she only does quilts for friends and family. I think they're talking about long arms in the comment section, saying if you can find a used one, they're not too pricey. A friend just got one for 1,500 new, and they are over 6,000. I think they're talking about the sit down Sweet 16 quilting machine. And for those that don't know, that's watching the broadcast, I do have a video series on how to purchase a long arm quilting machine. You can just search long arm on my homepage and it'll bring up that series, so you can determine what brand, what style it is that you like. Oh, he says the quilting marine saying he meant 200 quilts, not $200, because I had said $200 at cost as well. So we got that clarified. And then Darlene says, as a genealogist historian, my research is contractual. Is quilting contractual as well? Uh, I do, especially if I'm doing a quilt for somebody. I do make up my own contract for people because, and another thing also with this new age, I will also use email as my contract. But I will put in there that when I first start doing a quilt, that I would like to have half of my money in advance. Now, when I get that money, I don't, if it's given to me in a check or a money order, then I will cash that particular vehicle, but then I will pull that money back out and put it into an envelope and just set it to the side, because I don't like to spend money that I haven't earned. I'm just one of those type of people. And then that way I don't have to worry about what I have when I'm making quilts for people. And then if I get through with the quilt top and then they don't have the money or don't come back and get it, or they're having some issues with the particular quilt in itself. It's never happened that I've had any issues, but I always just like to keep the business money out of my personal money and have it readily available should they decide not to go forward with the project. So I've got something that I can give them back minus whatever time I've already worked on this project. So if I'm hit by surprise, I have something that I can give them right there. But I do contracts, and if they don't pay me by a particular time, like 30 days after I finish, after I've notified them that I have completed their project, then I'm no longer responsible for the project. And I would do that. I haven't, like I said, I haven't had to do this before, but I do put certain things in the contract, because I had a friend that made a quilt for somebody. She didn't collect anything from this person. Made a blue jean quilt. The lady brought all of her denim. My friend went out and bought the coordinating flannels to go with it. Did all of the work. She highlighted some particular areas in some of the was rag quilt style. So she put some special things in some of the squares. And it wasn't personal that she couldn't sell it, but she never got a dime from this lady. And it's been like 4 or 5 years, and this woman still has not come back to get this particular quilt. So me personally, I don't want to be doing a whole lot of work and I haven't received any money. Now, when I do long warm quilting, I do not collect any money because if they come back and get their quilt, I have a quilt top. So I now have a completed quilt because I've done the quilting. So I'm not as adamant about getting any money for those particular quilts. But I do give people like a 30-day window as well. And then another thing with long warm quilting, if any of you are long warm quilting for others, it's a little frustrating when you have somebody come to you and say, can you do my quilt? I need it by Christmas, and it's Thanksgiving, and they need a quilt as a Christmas gift. And what they're really saying is that they really need this quilt in the next week or two because they've got to put the binding on it and get it prepared to be gifted. And then you do this particular quilt, and I hear a lot of quilters say then they notify them and then they don't come get the quilt in a timely manner. It might be another week or two before they come get the quilt. So now you put their quilt before somebody else's. Some people do charge extra when they slide someone's quilt in front of the batch. But then for you not to get paid after you've done all the work and they're laxy-daisy about coming to pick it up, it's a little bit insulting in that part. So you have to be careful with that. So that's some of the reasons why, if you're doing this on a regular basis, that you may want to do some sort of contractual talking. And like I said, a lot of times I will use email. I even either slide my contract into the email, or I will make sure that I type everything out into the actual email. So it's just a little easier to do that when I don't have someone standing in front of me. So I'm still going back through the comments. I can't remember where I left off. Joan says that I was asked first time, it was outside the family, was honored at the request, couldn't begin to figure it. So thank you for this. Debbie Huey says, hi, Debbie. She's saying, Sissy, sorry I'm late. Do you have anything you want to add about pricing quilts? I don't know exactly how much of my talk you heard. Jackie K says, have them sign your estimate as a contract and pay for materials up front. And that's sort of kind of what I do. When I get to half, I got at least more than my materials up front. And then if they don't pick it up, I have a quilt. I'll donate to charity or do whatever with, but at least I have something. We got Cherise from Willingsboro, New Jersey. Welcome. Dewana says she always, I also make Afghans, and people say the same thing. And, you know, even when you're making Afghans, the the yarns are so expensive and you need so many of them that people just, I think they just don't really get it. They don't understand our craft at all. And Michelle says, I'm glad you're telling people about the cost. Lisa says, I only hear back from about 12% of the people I quote prices to. However, the clients I do get are more than happy and appreciate the work involved and are thrilled with their quilts. And that's true. That's why I said it depends on who's asking me, and I kind of know my demographic as to what my response will be. I have another friend that was a long armor. She worked with home designers, so people that were redoing their homes. And they basically just wanted her to quilt like comforter style quilts with a very thick batting. She did nothing very artistic, and she was pulling like 1,500 per comforter. So it just depends on who your target audience is that's asking you for this particular work. Some people are going to pay, and other people don't have a clue what it costs to make a quilt. So I kind of gear my discussion on that with whomever I'm talking to. That's how my response will go. So it varies. And then the Quilting Marine says, especially those of us who are emotionally involved with the journey. Michelle says, the hours we take to make the quilt, we will never get paid what it is worth. And that's absolutely correct. It takes me, say, a month to piece a particular quilt top. And if I even charged you at 16, so 40, so 16, no, 160 hours at $10. That's $1,600 in just labor right there. You're not going to get that. You haven't added in any material cost at all. Jackie K says she used to do wedding cakes and stopped that because people would bring a photo of a 5-tier cake and want to pay grocery store prices. Debbie says she's still waiting on her quilt. What quilt? You're confusing me. Cherie says, but think about it. How many quilts will you possibly own? I feel you should give them to people who really appreciate the art of it. And I agree. And that's, I don't mind even making quilts. And even when I price my quilts, that's why I will let them know what the value of that quilt is, because if I even know you a little bit, I will give you a discount, because we as quilters, we really just love making quilts. But what happens is when you start making things a business, then you never know how that customer is going to respond. You have some people that are so persnickety, they will go in and tell you this particular seam don't match, or they don't like this color of thread, and blah, blah, blah. And then you gave them this discount, and now they're driving you crazy, just to put it literally. And so you're not even getting paid, and you got somebody that's real persnickety. And then there's other people who just want to have a quilt and don't mind. And so I had a friend that I had on my list to do a quilt for, but they wanted to be put ahead of some people that were on the list. And so what I do is I give them a little test. If you want to be put ahead of the list, and I was going to add, you were already on my list anyway, I was going to make you a quilt, then I might tell them that I'll do you a quote for $300. I figure if they willing to come off of $300, then I'll be glad to make your quote ahead of time. I'm not saying that you've got to charge everybody for this, because we do the whole process of making the quilt is why we are in or doing this particular thing anyway. So, but if it's somebody that I was going to make a quilt for anyway, but you may not have gotten it for 5 years, and you want your quilt soon, then I will go ahead and just charge them some nominal fee just to see if they're really invested. And guess what? I bet you they take care of that quilt as well. So Dewana says she has a friend who was in Oklahoma, saw a quilt for $10,000. Yes, you can see a whole lot of quilts priced at various prices, especially some of the designers out here who are selling their quilts as they rotate them through their stash. You can see some out there for that price. And t-shirt quilts is one of the more difficult ones to price, because you can do a search and see where you can find somebody that will make a t-shirt quilt for you for $100, $150, and you mail it to them, mail them the shirts, and they mail you back a completed quilt. Well, I don't make those style of quilts. When I make my t-shirt quilts, I have quilting going through the shirts, because I want to make sure that that quilt lasts. So I don't produce just very basic t-shirt quilts with the quilting only between the blocks. And that's what you're kind of getting back when you send out to these people that only do quilts for $100 to $150. So I charge them the going rate. I just did that one where I used jersey knit. So it was a little bit different in texture. And so I had to do a whole lot to get that quilt done. And it was through a friend. It was a friend of my daughter. So I didn't charge them the going rate, but I did charge $500 for that particular quilt as with a discount. And that's because I had to do a lot of work with those t-shirt jerseys. So I do discounted things for people, but it just depends on who it is and how much they really want it. Diane says, what about just making quilts, put a price on it, and that's it? I know a girl who in Atlanta who makes quilts, put them in her store, and they range from $750 up to 5,000, and she sells them. And maybe that's because she has an actual store that she's selling from. But I've tried taking some of my retired quilts from my lectures. I've had them at quilt shows, and we used to have people in the previous years coming in asking if any of the quilts hanging were for sale. And of course, those quilts are not for sale most of the time in your at your local guild retreat. So I sometimes I will get a booth at our quilt guild show, and I put quilts in there, and I bet you not one quilt was over $100 because I was just trying to move. Do you know I didn't sell one quilt? So it's just amazing to me. I don't know what people want the price to be. So I guess it just depends on your area, your location, like where your store is located. If you're in an upper area where people value arts and crafts, then maybe you'll get more. But if you're in an environment where um, people want to go to Walmart and pay $50 and have a bed in the bag where they got the quilt, the pillow shams, the sheets, and everything else, then it's not just going to work in my area. So I just got people communicating with each other in the comment section, which I love. And Michelle said something about deposits on quilts. And I think I covered that before I seen the comment. Cherie says, I've taken friends to the store to pick fabrics for their quilts, and then I have them pay for it. Then they really understand that it's more than just a blanket. Yeah, I think somebody's comment before was people calling our quilts blanket, and it does make me cringe a little bit when somebody calls it a blanket or a comforter, because there's differences in the two. Comforters are mostly really poofy, and they have very limited amount of quilting, whereas quilts have a little bit more quilting, more flat natured. And a blanket, of course, is nothing like a quilt at all. So just amazing. The Quilting Marine says that term blanket makes me want to put on my drill instructor hat. Jennifer says she does a lot of t-shirt quilts and asks for one half the quoted price in advance. That way the customer and I are both invested in the project. Linda says, quilting is my hobby, so I don't sell any. I give them to charity, etc. If I try to make money from them, it would be too arduous. I love quilt making. I just love making quilts like most of us. And that's the thing. I will make and try a whole lot of new techniques out, and you can always make those into charity quilts. I try different color combinations, things I wouldn't normally do. Sometimes I'm surprised at them, but yes. Make sure that you get a signature or at least an e-sig. Yeah, when I do that, I don't ever start on anything unless they comment back with me about what's going on. So I just use the documentation. Like I said, I haven't been burned, but most of my people have been through someone that I contract through, because I don't really advertise that I make quilts for people for the most part. And I figure if you'll stay safe with making t-shirt or memory quilts, because people are invested in those more than just a generic quilt. Too much heart and soul goes into it to do it for next to nothing. That was from Jackie K. And Linda is seconding that. And Sandra, hi Sandra. She's just saying she had computer issues again. So Love just came in asking how late. She came in at 7:30. So you were 30 minutes late or so. So we've now been on 10 minutes at this point since you've been in. Lauren King says, yes, when she's talking to Charisse, when they pay for their fabric, batting, and threads, they appreciate quilting more when they realize it's not cheap. Hi, Eric. He's late to the party. And I have taken one person to the store to purchase their fabrics, and it was so funny because I was trying to get them to match fabrics that would look good together, or, something that would make a beautiful quilt. And they strictly started getting really cheap, and they picked fabrics that to me that were not the most prettiest fabrics. And they were making a memory quilt for their mom. It was her like 75th birthday, and I made the quilt, but I was not happy with the fabrics that they chose because then they went very cheap and didn't get anything to match. Started out with an African print and then started going into florals because the coordinating African prints cost more. So they just used one African print and started pulling other things, and it just didn't match very well. It wasn't enough scrappy. I think it was like maybe 6 fabrics total. So it wasn't scrappy enough to do that. So, yeah, it's good to take them to the store every now and again. And then she say, oh, and then Sharice is still sharing. Then she says she takes them shopping for their fabric, and then she charges a separate price for the labor, which is basically what I do, because I do break it down into the categories of what each thing is for. I'll talk about quilt top, thread cost, batting cost, if I'm using any fusibles or interfacing. So I do break all of that out individually as well. So Love wants to know if she could be placed on my list. You'll never know how many times I've been asked that question, especially when I was really making them back about 10 years ago, when I was really kicking them out to get them to family members. I had so many people at the guild telling me that. I bet I came in every month with about 5 family quilts. And Robin says we have to educate our customers so they know what goes into making a quilt. Oh, Debbie is saying that she's my sissy. That's what she's looking for her quilt as a family. You can make your own, Debbie. Okay. Wanda says she makes quilts for me, which is for herself. Cheryl says anything made by hand is a labor of love. Unless people make things themselves, they don't realize what goes into it. It's a matter of educating the public. And I agree. And they still know, because some of the people that ask me, because I'm around a lot of line dancers, so I get asked this question a lot. And they know that I make the quilts. They know that it takes a certain skill and talent. They know that they don't have that certain skill or talent, but they're still not willing to invest. And I'll just make some comment about the starting price being $350, depending on what it is that you want. Because if it's a basic t-shirt quilt, then maybe I can do that in a lap size or twin size for you for $350. So I just give this generic ballpark figure as a start, and that generally gets rid of anybody that's not serious about having a quilt made. Um, I'm trying to go through the comment section. I think it moved on me. So I got Eric. Okay, so I think I ended with Cheryl. So Debbie says, my in-laws feel that machine quilting should be done as cheaply as Walmart comforter. And when you get into rural parts, especially in Missouri, I'm aware of that there are places that will quilt quilts for $40 and send them back to people. And I'm like, I just don't know how they can even take their time, because $40 just to load some quilts is a chore. So I don't even understand how somebody can charge you just $40 to quilt a queen or king size quilt. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not one of those, so I don't work that cheap. So thank you, Debbie, for that. I cannot pronounce your name. Is Naiku, Naikai. I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry about that, but welcome to the live chat. Yeah, and a lot of people, my family members didn't even understand about the long arm being so expensive. I got Cherie sharing that in the comment section. But you know, it's all relative to where we spend our money. Like I said, I purchased my long arm by saving when I was working because I knew when I retired that I was going to want one. But you know, they just don't get it. It's where you spend your money. So um some people like fancy clothes all the time. Some people like being at the hairdresser every week. And I was one of those people that went to the hairdresser every week until I started doing my own. But you know, go to the nail shop. It's all in what you're into. If you're into that particular thing, you're in it, and that's what you do. There are so many different things out here. And then when we start telling them what we spend on particular things, then they're kind of have like a little sticker shock, but that's because it's not important to them. And while I'm talking about sticker shock, I have not gotten through all the comment sections, but I don't know if you're not members of my TeaQuilts Facebook group, you may not know that Free Spirits Fabric is going to be closing, and they say soon. They did not give an estimated date, but they're no longer taking any orders for fabric that won't ship by May of this year. And if you don't know, Free Spirit has the Tulip Pink lines, the Rowan lines, the Facet lines, those particular type of artists. So I'm sure that they would be picked up by somebody else. But you know, if you Google it and find it, or if you go to TeaQuilts and you get the link from my TeaQuilts Facebook group, if you start reading into the comment section, it's very interesting because you have both sides of the line as to why things cost or is selling cheaply as they are. You got some people that are saying that they sell to online shops like fabric.com where you know they buy a lot of yardage and so they get the better price, and so then they can discount it more and they can undercut the quilt shops who sell. And then you have some of the quilt shops that are saying that it's very difficult for them to get the product. So it's a lot going on with that. And the reason why I'm telling you that, because that is part of our cost as a quilter, as well as it could mean that more manufacturers may or may not be going in this same route. So we just need to be aware of what's going on. And I've kind of put my 2 cents in on the TeaQuilt side. I do understand both sides of the issue, but you know, it's all relative to where you are on a particular day. Tawana says quilts are like paintings, but people don't want to see that. Kaylin says, I just cut up my old Harley shirts from the 90s. I'm just waiting for my interfacing to arrive. I watched Lisa's awesome tutorials. Lisa is in the house tonight. So Lisa must have something on t-shirt quilts. Debbie is saying her in-laws, it made her mad and hurt her feelings when they were talking about the price of quilts. The price of her machine quilting. I'm getting notifications from Facebook, so they're popping up. And Diane is saying she was the one that supplied the comment about a friend selling quilts at a set price, so she's looking into doing that. And Diane, can you put the name of your website in the chat box? She actually sells a lot of African print or African themed fabric, so if you're interested in that, you can shop with her. We only got a few more minutes, so I'm trying to go through some of the comments now. Cherie says she learned a lesson in 2014, made a quilt for a newly engaged couple, and they had the nerve to send me a picture of them having a picnic on the quilt. Yeah, that's why I make the denim quilts for my outdoor quilts. They'll hold up a little bit better. Somebody, Dewana is asking Kaylin to add a picture of her t-shirt quilt. You can't add any pictures on YouTube, but if you are a member of my Facebook group, you can add pictures there. You cannot add pictures on YouTube, which is sad. Bye, Jennifer. She has to go. Hi, Gwen Spencer. Quilting Marine is still stuck on the New York Beauty quilt. He's still in all of that. I have started one, and I've done like a little small wall hanger where I did more of an art quilt, did a few New York Beauties, and then I did some applique spirals, but I am actually making the traditional New York Beauty. I have maybe 20 blocks made. I need to make a lot more if I'm going to get it bed size, though. Robin says that she's learned that once you give a quilt away, I have to let it go. Sometimes I'm just happy it's being used and I store it in the closet hidden away, although I've only given away simple quilts. And I have learned to let quilts go that I give away. It's just that you won't get a second quilt if I see your dog chewing on the quilt, basically. Um, Lisa is saying she's going to have to Google the New York Beauty. The Quilting Marine is telling her not to stare too long because they're really pretty. Eric says, would you believe I haven't a quilt for myself yet? Everything I've done has either been given away as birthday or Christmas gift. I can never do a trunk show of my own. And I bet you I probably have, just guessing, maybe 300 quilts that I rotate through various trunk shows. And then I also use them as wall art, and I change them out on my beds for the season and so forth. So I do use them, I get them out, but mostly I use them for my trunk shows because that's really where I have the most fun. It's not that I make the most money doing that, but I have the most fun with that. I actually love teaching. A quilt is a personal investment, just like any work of art. Sarah says, I know I only made one. All kids are asking me to make them a quilt. I don't know what I'm doing yet. And that's where you can just have fun. If you're just starting out, you can make a lot of kids' quilts. They're going to use them up really good. And you can just do a lot of practice. When I was making my family quilts, I was doing different fabric combinations that I would never use. And I was surprised at how well some of them turned out. I tried different techniques as well. Robin says, hello, I made a t-shirt quilt for my sister. I charged her $250 and she wanted it free, but she got it when she gave me $150. Eric says, free spirit closing. Oh, where am I going to get my Tula Pink and Facet Fix? And I'm sure that somebody is going to pick them up, or maybe they'll be their own manufacturers. They may start producing their own fabrics. Like Tula is now her own publisher, so she's very business savvy. So I'm sure she's going to bounce back bigger and better. Claude B 820. People don't believe I have 7 machines. They all do different things. People spend their money on what interests them exactly. And hi, Barbara. She says she's new to this. I'm not sure if she's new to quilting or new to being online. If it's both, welcome to TeaQuilts. And if you're new to quilting, you have any questions, you can just drop them into the comment section of any of my videos. You can also join the Facebook group where I answer questions there as well. I often tell my husband as a joke that a sewing machine is cheaper than a divorce. Oh, she says, Barbara says, I just got a used long arm a week ago. That's awesome. I've been hearing, depending on the brand of long arm that you get, I hear that the long arm machines really do hold up well over time. So that's a great investment. And I can't, Jackie says, my husband likes sports cars, so he can't say anything about a new machine. And Barbara's got the Voyager 17. People were asking in the comment section. And the Quilting Marine is saying that he wants to see my New York Beauty. It's like in storage. So whenever and if I pull it out, when it comes out next, I'll try to remember to take a photo of it, or I'll try to see if I got it. I probably got it on one of my websites. It's probably on my TeaQuilts website under Quilts, but I can't be for sure. I have a website that's www.teaquilts, T-E-A, quilts with an S.com. And it has most of my quilt work there. Some of it is on my blog, which I am not using right now. And we are a few minutes over. I'm just trying to make sure I go through the comment section to make sure I've got everybody's comments. And Dewana wants to know who sells the African fabrics. She left. Her name is Diane Ronnie. Let me see if I can find it for you on Facebook real quick before I close off. So I'm going into, I just can't remember the name of her. So just bear with me a few minutes. I'm just trying to look up her Facebook and see if it's listed on her page anywhere. If she's got a link for a post. But it's not working. And I can't use this machine here. Trying to use my iPad and it's just blank here for a minute. So I do appreciate you all coming to the chat room tonight. And as soon as I can get this iPad to go to Diane's page, I will close us out for tonight. So if you're done for tonight, you can go ahead and just sign off. I thank everybody for watching. If you're wanting to know where to buy African print fabrics, just hold on a few minutes. I'm trying to get my technology here to work. I guess it's moving slow because I'm actually in the upstream mode. Okay. It's just taking its little time. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm at least getting to her page now. And she sells different pre-cuts. She has sales on, sometimes she'll have fat quarter sales. I think it's on Tuesdays where you buy so many for a particular price. It is moving so slow because I'm upstreaming. So I tell you what I'll do is I'll add this into the video when it goes live. I'll put it into the chat box so that way you can see it. But I have done a search for her. And it's giving me videos. All I want is the post, not the videos. I see a few of you are still hanging on, waiting on it. So I'm really trying to get it. Okay. Now I'm hoping that I'm on her page, and I'm hoping that she's done a post from her site. Okay, the name of her website, you can Google this. It's called Snaps, Scraps, and Stamps. So just Google that and it'll come up. And like I said, her specialty is African print fabrics, and she does sometimes pre-cut squares or fat quarters for the most part. So please go check her out. She's from Atlanta. And she even has some specials where you might even can get shipping included sometimes. So I am going to go ahead and sign off here. And I thank you all for watching and your patience for me for getting to Diane's site. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.